Welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen. It's really two programs in one. This is a series that appeals to your creative side. Food that is sumptuous stuff. How could that be? This is a program about people who want to eat healthy and reduce calories. Actually, it's about food with an aromatic quality that fills the nose. Oh, sure, but it's also about keeping my arteries clean by reducing fat. But it doesn't mean a thing if the food isn't rich and colorful. Maximize the flavor. Okay, but I must have healthy food that I can cook in minutes. I must minimize the risk. So welcome to Graham Kerr's Kitchen, where we get our heads together just for you.
Well, welcome back again. This is a very British program. This is Scottish and Irish combined, but basically the method that I wanted to share with you was how to make a light stew, white stew, almost like the fricassees and blanquettes that the French do. But this is a stew which means that the meat gets cooked on top of the stove and it's well seasoned and everything else. But I've got a rather intriguing way of doing this one. Around the outside of each of the dish when they're actually served are very fresh spinach leaves, well selected like this as a kind of garland in a bowl. I've used a kind of pastry-ish kind of bowl. And then the pieces of meat are placed in the top and very, very bright, surprisingly bright pieces of carrot poke up through that with pearl onions in it as well. It's just lovely. And it's got the most wonderful flavour, real depth of flavour, and yet only 2 ounces of meat per serving, which is what brings the risk right down at the same time as sending the flavours of this straight through the roof. You ready for that? Come on through, I'll show you how it's done. Of course, one of the great things when you're ever making any kind of stew or braise or anything else, any moist heat method, is that there must be a great juice for it, or stock, or whatever you would like to call. Now here's the ingredients that the best cuisine in the world use, the French. This is called a pot au feu, a pot on the fire. And a chicken would be added, and that wouldn't be just a tender little thing. This would be a good old scrawny fellow who's been around for a while. And turnip would go in there, perhaps swede, carrots, veal bones, and onions stuck with a few cloves. Potato may go in. Some lean beef would go in. I mean, and they throw it into this pot with lots of water and it simmers away and the whole neighbourhood knows that, they have their pot au feu on the go. Well, in this case, I want to show you something a little different from that, because although all of that meat would be eaten and vegetables thrown away, it's a long process. Now, here's a shorter one. If you go out and you get a couple of tins of 1/3 less salt chicken stock, all right, chicken broth, and then one of beef broth. Just turn them out. Now, don't have apoplexy at the moment. I'm going to show you something that's quite neat. Then take the bottom thing off, crush them down, and put them in the receptacle where they come and collect the tins. All right, now, here it goes. So even though there's fat on the top, doesn't matter, because I'm going to show you how to deal with that. 1 bay leaf, just drop that in. A little parsley, say, 1/4 cup if you crushed it right down. Stalks as well. Stalks have got more flavour than the root, and then the... no, they don't have more flavour than the root. They have more flavour than the tops. And here is thyme. Now, this is a hunk of thyme, fresh thyme, but you could use dried thyme if you like. It works just as well. Now, here's a surprise. Because you can't get beef broth or bouillon of any kind, which is anyway salt reduced, just take some thin slices of potato there and drop those down. I just cut those thinly. Drop those down into the pot like that, and those individual slices of potato will actually soak up some of the salt from that. They'll get thrown out and they'll have done the salt thing. Okay, now, in here we have the black peppercorns, which are 6 black peppercorns. 1, 2, 3. Oh gosh, how is it going to succeed? One got missing, and it seems hardly necessary, but believe me, it is wonderful, especially these 2 little fellows here. Cloves. drop the 2 cloves into the top. And then if you're going to use this in any context other than the one that I'm going to use it in today, you may want to add a package of gelatin. And if you don't like the idea of gelatin, then agar would be a good idea, because gelatin is rendered down pork skin, at least it may be part of that. And for religious purposes, that may not be a good idea for some. But agar is derived from seaweed, and that's a much better way of doing it, okay? And it gives you mouthfeel, which you'd have missing from that marvelous pot au feu. Okay, stick this on the heat. Now, I don't have any heat over there, but I do have it here. This is the one that has been cooking for just on half an hour, just a very light simmer. And if I smell that, that is totally different experience than the previous, ordinary stock that comes out of a tin or out of a package. Never use the one out of a package. I don't like that stuff. Okay. All right. Now, onion. I've got a pan on the heat here, and as with any of the white stews, what we need to do is just to cut the onion roughly, and in order to be able to get the natural oils out of it, I keep on about that, and put 1 teaspoon only of oil. Again, doesn't much matter, so it's going to come off by another technique, but just drop that in. Now, this is really important. Normally, when I cook things for you, I'm browning them. This time, no browning, because everything is kept as light as possible. So we just put that into the top, and here's the meat. Now, this is a neck of lamb. This is you know what a neck is. And so the neck meat, if you look at it, these are the vertebrae running down and over this side. Now, you can imagine, you see all those little sinews running through. This is a connective tissue called collagen. And collagen is something which eventually, long, slow heat, melts it out, like the gelatin that I would have put in there. It becomes gelatinous, and because the mouth smoothness and the lovely way that it touches your lips is just delicious. And meat which is close to the bone is sweeter. Have you ever heard that said? When you eat a lamb chop and it's on the bone, how nice that is. Okay, so we just pop those down. There's 1.5 pounds of meat there for 4 people. And you say, well, it's not 2 ounces a head, and you'd be right, of course, but there's a lot of bone and fat. I'll show you how that comes off. So all of that's popped around like that. Now, we've got here just a little sieve, because obviously with the bits and pieces of the debris, you just pour that debris out of there, and that they're the pieces of the potato and things, all sort of dead and kind of well done, good chap, and thrown out. And there's enough here to just cover that, and just good. And I just add just a little bit more. I want to have about 1 inch of clear space between the top of the ingredients at this stage, so I've added about 3/4 cup of cold water onto the top. And now it cooks, and it's so lovely when it's cooked. It really is delicious, so it won't quieten it down in any way. Right, so that goes on for 2.5 hours, right? That's a long time, I know, but just set it aside and just don't worry about it. 2.5 hours. Now, let's look at this. You see these little onions here? This onion, these are not really pearl onions, but they're a nice sort of about 1 inch wide, and they are terrific, but they're an absolute pain to skin, unless you do this little trick here. Drop those into boiling hot water, put the lid on the top of that, and put it away quietly somewhere where it won't get in anybody's way. 5 minutes later, you can run those under a cold water tap, and they come just off like this. It's just amazing. It's really delightful. Tell you what, barley. This must be in anything which is either a Scottish or the Welsh. It's not Welsh, but it might as well be Welsh as well, because it's Irish and Scottish, and I'm trying to put this together. Just before we get to that, let's have a look at the stock. Now, here is the one here in this pot. You'll have to believe me on this one. This has had 2.5 hours cooking, okay? So now, at the end of 2.5 hours cooking, you'll say, it's such a waste of all my time. Look at it. It looks horrid. Don't worry. It's going to look nice. So this is with the bones, and the meat is just about to fall off the bones right now. We take that stock and pour it into the stock strainer. Now you watch that. The fat's going to come to the top and it's going to look just terrific. Now for the pearl barley. Well, this one is the actual pot barley, and this one is pearl barley. Now, they are really two different things. Let me try and explain why. This pot barley here cooks up and looks like this. It's darker and it's rougher. It's got the husk intact and is more nutritious. This one, however, has got the husk off and it looks like sort of little grains of rice and plumps up terrifically like this, like a little sponge. And it's delicious. And it has this wonderful texture to it. For my money, I would go for the pot, not because of the nutritious side, because it's very minute, really, but because of the texture. It's got, I mean, it's like chewing on a real sponge, if you've ever done that. Okay, well, these we put on one side, and let me show you what you do. You rinse it out. They've got a quarter of a cupful in here. Pop it in some hot water, and cook that for just 30 minutes first. But the reason is because that takes 45 minutes to cook, okay? And the vegetables I'm going to cook in this just take 30 minutes to cook. So obviously this has got to have a little bit of cooking ahead of time. Now by actually cooking that, you see how much that increases from a quarter of a cup. It's to almost 3/4 of a cup. So it's really plumped in size and it's almost cooked, but it needs just that little bit more cooking. All right? Tell you what, let's go whilst this is having go. Let's go off to the supermarket and see what's happening there. Well, thank you, Graham. Come along this way. This is when you want to make that choice for the meats where you want to get that light look to it, but not necessarily pure white look to it. And there's some choices to be made here, interesting ones. First of all, this is a piece of veal, and this would obviously cook up very white by the time it's cooked. This is called Provimi veal, P-R-O, protein, V-I for vitamin, and M-I for mineral. Now, this happens to be cooked as indeed these are, which would be a great selection for a dish like this because it's got lots of connected tissue. It's actually farmed by putting the little animal into a small space and then feeding it with formula, and it never gets outside at all. And I don't know about you, but that hurts inside somewhere. So I think I would prefer to put Provimi on one side and have that as an argument that somebody else gets into. But now here is veal which has been actually cooked, prepared in a way so that it's grain-fed and gets outside and gets to meet its fellow creatures. And that seems to be a more humane way of doing it. So I would buy veal of that nature, and I'll show you how actually it cooks and the difference in the color, but it's marginal. I could use fresh, fryer legs, which is very useful. Here's something that could be done, which is, this is the pancreas, or called sweetbreads. They are delicious done in this way, but it's very high in cholesterol. So I think I'd probably put that on one side. So what are you left with? Well, here's a couple of things that you're left with. Neck of pork and pork bones on any part of the pork blade, any part that moves a lot like this, that would be good. And then, of course, the lamb necks, which is what we're using for this dish anyway. So there it is. They're just some of the alternatives that you can use when you're doing a nice light stew. And back to you, Graham, because you're doing it. Thanks very much. Hey, I enjoy little trips to the supermarket. The difference between veal, which has been actually running around outside, and what it goes like when it's cooked is this. So you don't get it go as white as it could go. It doesn't go as white, but it's okay. For me, it's nice that you just leave the wretched animal to go running around than having to be cooped up. But that's somebody else's argument. Okay, all right, now, everything's simmering away very nicely, and what we'll do is we'll get right down to it and skim the broth off. Now, you remember we had this broth here? Now, here is the fat that is now congealed on the top. Some people say leave it overnight and let the fat come to the surface. Hey, I never got time to leave anything overnight. So we just pour, you get a little bit of fat off the top one there. The pan's just a little hot there, lift it to one side. And pour it through, and what's happening, if you've never seen this before, is that we are actually pouring clear, fat-free, or almost fat-free stock off the bottom, and it's coming off the bottom of that jug, and we're leaving the fat on that top surface. So when we get to the fat, you can stop, and that would have gone in and been luscious, but at the same time, not so good for the old outros. All right, now into that, you just heat that up, and I've got some carrot there. I've got a pound of carrot, a pound of Finnish potatoes, all right? Now with this one, take a slice through and roll the carrot as you go. Just roll it a half turn and cut. It's called roll cutting. And this way you get a rather intriguing looking shape. It used to be a classic way of turning each one of those carrots, so they were barrel shaped, but that takes forever, and this has a certain amount of waste to it. This has no waste to it. So just pop those up and in. This is a finished potato. This is called Yukon Gold, if you like, and just trim it to size. First of all, make sure the surfaces are flat, and then you should be able to get an easier way of cutting it through so as to get little squares out of it. And this, I think, although this is a food of the people, which means that you're actually getting food that would be part of tradition. When a food is part of tradition, people say you can hack it up and it doesn't really matter what you do because people wouldn't go to that trouble. Do you know, I found that not necessarily to be true. When people reverence food and it's part of their life and their whole family, they take a lot of time over it. So that is 1 pound of the yellow finished potatoes. And they've got a waxy finish to them. They take 30 minutes to cook. And it's really exciting how those soak up the juices that we've actually, skimmed the fat from. Same time, here are the onions, and those onions, remember, that we put in for 5 minutes and then rinsed under cold water. And we've got 16 of those, and pop those onto the top of it, and they cook in the same period of time. So all of that goes together, and a little freshly ground black pepper over the top. Give it a bit of smoky zing. And love fresh pepper. Put a lid on the surface and those virtually steam up in that same mix. Okay, now let's assume that time passes like this. Half an hour just went by. Huh. Don't do that too often in the kitchen. Then you lift the lid and that's had the half an hour. Now, half an hour, remember how we got these out and these pieces were falling off the bone. It's still connected by that collagen, but the collagen is melted and it now becomes gelatinous and it's so smooth and wonderful. So you take that meat and you take with a couple of forks, you scrape that off the bone. So you've got 8 ounces of meat and about a pound of fat and the trimming. So then you shovel that in on top of the vegetables, like this. This is so tired now that it can be bye-bye time, for that. And then mushrooms. We've got a couple of mushrooms per head, and dump those in. Those take very little time to cook, just about 5 minutes. And there should be something else. Oh, the barley. The barley that we cooked, the barley goes down onto the top too. Now, move all of that around, and you're going to say to yourself, it seems to need just a little bit more juice. If it needs just a little bit more, do it. But at this stage, I would say to you, it should just dampen it. Put the lid on and cook that through until it's just perfect. And it'll look like this one here. Now, you don't need anything else but to perhaps taste the seasoning and make sure, but I know the seasoning here is perfect. This is what it looks like. The barley, the vegetables are perfectly cooked. They're not all tired out. If you put all the vegetables in together at the beginning, 2.5 hours, come on. Vegetables will be gone, but these vegetables are 30 minutes and they're perfect. All right. Now, put the spinach around the outside, those leaves of spinach around the outside, and you see there's enough moisture here. It's not swimming in moisture. It isn't supposed to be. It's not a soup. And you just put that down with the spinach leaves around the outside. Wow. Now, the smell of it is just gorgeous. When you think 1.5 pounds, basically the bones have been extracted into this and it's got this great flavor. And then here is just a little sprinkling of parsley on the top. Now there's one little trick before we get right on with this and serve it, and that's a little piece of muslin and a little bit of rosemary. Now, if you've got fresh rosemary and got it growing, it's my second favorite herb. Basil or basil is my best. But this is wonderful stuff. It's just lovely. And where it grows around the house, the woman is in charge. That's a nice thing. You might want to encourage your husband to grow it. Then just simply roll that up in the muslin like that and knot that together. And what you've got is you've got some protection against those spiky little leaves getting into everything you own. All right? Put a little thing like that. Throw that into the time when you've got the vegetables cooking in the half an hour. Bingo. Okay, let's have a look. It smells gorgeous. Let's see how it tastes. So you remember I said that what it would look like is it would have surprisingly bright carrots. That's the reason for the surprise. They just got cooked in time. All right, this is compared with a white stew, which in most cases is covered in a white sauce. And it's really lighter meats which can come through and which haven't been coloured at any time during the cooking process. We could call that a blanquette, and that is really what we're trying to compare this to. Now, you've got a big drop at the top with 296 calories. Although this may change, I know I haven't said this to you before, but you know, I always do the numbers and change the dish as I'm moving through the dish. And occasionally this changes, so look in the book and you'll find the exact number for this. Okay, fat down to 7, and that will be the same. Carbohydrate at 37, that could be going up a bit. Percentage of calories from fat is 20, but I wouldn't mind betting it's down to about 15 as a result of what we've been doing. Cholesterol, 327. Look at this, 46. That's really down on the deck for something as meaty, tasting as this. And 425 is halving the amount of sodium that there is in it. So, pretty good stuff, actually. And it's a really classical dish of the British Isles, and anyone who says that there's nothing good that ever was edible from the British Isles is nonsense. You know, this is, look at it. Oh, mother. Oh. It reminds me of my mum. It really does. And take the leaf of spinach, partly wilted, eat it on the top. It's a wonderful chaser. Don't forget, your own ideas applied to those people you love. Springboard. Well, I've got the most incredible looking thing. This almost looks like one of those games that you would play somehow. But it is a game, but in a sense it's a very expensive game. I suppose recently you've been noticing, like I have, that there's been a tremendous amount of attention on our wellness, on how health conscious we can be, and how to add life to our years rather than years to our life necessary. Well, there's a protocol amongst doctors and physicians and people like that, and I'm privileged to know a number of them, and this is the way they tend to do it. These are good doctors. They start out by asking you what you eat, then find out how much you actually exercise, and then what you do to relax yourself. And then if they find out that there's nothing basically that they can do about you, in other words, that you seem to be doing very well at those things and are very disciplined, or you're lying and you're not disciplined at all, they'll make their decision on that one. And then they draw a kind of line on that one, because this is what you and I can do by way of prevention. Then they have to start doing things by way of intervention. And medication is the first thing that they'll try, pop a pill of some kind, and then they may have to be forced to cut pieces out, which happens now and again. Now, after the surgery has taken place, there's a thing called rehab or rehabilitation. And guess what they say to you when we're going through rehab? What do you eat, and how do you exercise, and what do you do to relax? It's not really a list, is it? It's actually really a spiral. Have you heard the phrase spiraling health costs? I certainly have recently. I'll show you how they spiral. Here's our side of it. Eat, exercise, relax. Here's the other side, medicate, surgery, rehab. And then what happens next? What do you eat? How do you exercise? Relax. Medicate, surgery, eat. As it goes round and round and round. But you know, each time that we're asked to do something to help ourselves and to be a little disciplined in something, eat, exercise, relax, and we don't do it, then, you know, we get into a tighter and tighter circle. Of course, that was good. And so you go round and round and round until you finally disappear because there's no more room to move. And the biggest thing that I can say about making the right decision about what to eat, and that's where you and I get together every day, you know, this side is something we can really do, and we can really have such a good influence upon our families. So my biggest plea to you is, let's row in and help the healthcare system by being good prevention people. And let's really work at this business of eating, exercising, and relaxing first. Then maybe we don't have to run up a bill on the medication and the surgery and all the rehabilitation. Hey, doesn't it make a lot of sense? Okay. Well, And the flavor will stay with you for an incredible period of time, and the chaser of having the fresh spinach leaves on the top. It's such a neat idea. Hope you'll try that one. Really good stuff. Till next time we meet, God bless.